Welcome back. I am John P. Today, we are going to be talking about whether or not the watch market is actually crashing. I've been getting emails and direct messages on my Instagram, The Real John P., as well as we've been receiving phone calls at Delray Watch, delraywatch.com, from so many collectors the last, let's say, week or so, truly wanting to know if the watch market is crashing. Should they be selling their watches? Should they be buying watches? I'm not necessarily going to be giving any particular advice, but I'm going to be sharing with you what I'm observing, what I'm seeing, as well as what I think may happen with particular brands. But in short, because things change very quickly today, right? Look at different markets, things go up, things go down. The news hits, it goes one way, it goes another. It's really difficult because of the way information travels today to say with great certainty what will happen. But I'll share with you based on what you have all been saying to me in these various forms of communication. I think it's so cool that we can actually do this. So make sure to leave things in the comments below if you'd like to contribute to the discussion. But before we do that, on the wrist today, very cool Gerald Genta Jump Hour watch. You can see this once again on my Instagram, The Real John P. So, is the watch market crashing? I'll say crashing is a very strong word, and I don't know that I'm quite ready to say that that is the case as of just yet. Now, let me explain. There has been a pullback in very hot Rolex sport models, right? Many dealers are pumping on the brakes, not willing to continue to increase their exposure with these particular models, right? Things like Daytonas, a lot of dealers I've heard, especially wholesale, have pulled back the buying on these Daytonas, stainless steel Daytonas, and the like. Also, Patek Philippe Nautilus, 5711, 5712. The Nautilus line, as well as the Aquanaut line, there's been a pullback in that as well. These were watches that truly people could ask and name their price, and now this is almost a game of hot potato to an extent. Now, this wasn't the case a week ago, but it seems to be the case today that 5711, if you have one of these in your hand, it's a bit of a game of, once again, hot potato, and you should probably move it on. Now, if you own these watches, I'm not saying that necessarily there's going to be a big tank and you're going to lose. That's not necessarily the case, but what I'm saying is there is not only the feeling from a lot of collectors, but also this feeling from a lot of dealers that there's serious uncertainty, and the side that it seems to be leaning on is the side of an overall watch market correction, but most drastically in these ultra hot pieces, right? The Rolex Submariner, the Rolex Submariner Hulk, the Rolex Daytona, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, trading several times retail. Throw in the blue dials of these watches as well for the extra above retail price markup. And of course, the Patek Philippe Nautilus, the sport watches from Patek Philippe. These watches seem to have a substantial pullback in pricing and demand, and of course, those are connected to each other as well. What about all the other brands? Well, all the other brands, quite honestly, seem to be doing very well. Now, I can't tell you about retail because we're still dealing with certain holdups from the factories coming out of COVID on certain models and things like that from within certain brands, but that was already happening, right? Certain brands like Omega were already selling a lot. They didn't have a lot of supply, especially when talking about certain Omega Seamaster watches like the 300M with the ceramic bezel, certain dial and bezel combinations like the white dial. There was already a little bit of a difficult time obtaining these, especially at discount, unless buying from a boutique or one of their A or AAA label authorized dealers. So there's already some of that happening. But in terms of the demand for a lot of these other brands that exist, right? The Girard-Perregaux, the JLC, even talking about brands such as Zinn, there doesn't appear to be a huge correction nor a lack of demand. I can say at Delray Watch, we're still working with many collectors. We haven't really seen too much of a dip on that end. It's really the focus on these ultra expensive pieces, if you will, or these ultra desirable, these watches that have been trading at several times retail where, you know, looking back on YouTube, if you watch a lot of YouTube, there'd be endless videos about, is the bubble going to pop? Is the bubble going to pop? Is it a bubble? What's a bubble? Is Rolex a bubble? Is Patek Philippe a bubble? Regardless, there's a pullback on those watches, but all the others seem to be doing pretty well. Will the entire market follow like it did on the come up, right? That's another question that I've been getting. Because of Patek Philippe, Rolex, these watches doing so well, endless news sources and media and bloggers and everyone talking about these watches, generating a lot of buzz, a lot of demand for these things. It brought a lot of the other watches and watch brands in the market up with it. Now, are they going to follow on the way down? I don't think so. Now, let me tell you why. If we think about it, through COVID, as well as just because so many people have been attracted to watches for the reasons on the come up, I think it would be very difficult for these collectors to disappear, right? And they have to purchase something. And if you see a downward movement on these ultra high above retail priced watches going down, you may be a little bit more hesitant as a collector to buy one of those watches, whereas the others have only seen price increases without really much of a correction. Now you start seeing these big swings, down 20%, down 30%. Okay, the 5711 is 150,000. Now it's 120. Now it's 100. Okay, maybe it pops up a little bit and goes up. Is that going to worry you? Are you going to want that watch? Or perhaps maybe something, now of course you have to like the watch, but in the grand scheme of things, speaking in generalizations, maybe you'd prefer the watch that has only really seen upside because of the increased demand, but hasn't seen that downside because there are more collectors to support it, and it really just hasn't reached that level of demand where a correction just had to happen. That's the way I see it. In terms of the watches we're selling at Del Rey Watch, we're still selling a lot of the same watches that we always have and love to focus on, right? When we started Del Rey Watch, we were focusing on the brands that delivered a lot of the great value that we found out there in the market. Girard-Perregaux, UN, JLC, let's talk Zinn watches, H. Moser, if we want to talk independent manufacturers, high-end, all full in-house independent manufacturers. And those watches are still selling. People still are buying them. In fact, in terms of H. Mosers, they even want them a little bit more than a few weeks ago for some reason. So there is some other factor, or there are multiple factors at play here. But do I think there's going to be, after this drawn out explanation that I'm sharing with you here, do I think there's going to be some kind of huge catastrophic crash? The signs don't seem to support that. A lot of people are still trading. The trading volume that we see at Del Rey hasn't really gone down, maybe on the Rolex and Patek Philippe, but we never really focused on that anyway. So I can certainly understand the hesitation when talking about these watches that trade at several times the retail price. I can understand that, and I can see why some dealers out there might be very fearful of their current exposure in the market. But we also see that anything can happen, right? Anything can happen in the world. At the beginning of COVID, there was also a huge concern from everyone about the watch market, and the opposite happened. So it's really difficult to say with great certainty. But once again, because so many people like you, especially myself, we've all gotten into watches, spent way more time on it than we anticipated over the last few years, just because of the circumstances at play, it's really difficult for me to fathom just an overall market crash. But there's always opportunity in everything. So let's say that there was a pullback. Maybe it gets you into the pricing of something that you believe it's worth it, right? Maybe a better buying opportunity for you in that case, or a different trading opportunity. So there's two sides to every situation. And I think the good thing is at least there are way more watch collectors today than there used to be. So way more opportunities. And I think setting aside the pre-owned market, the brands also will have to adapt to the time. So we're going to see a lot of cool and interesting and new things coming out of them should the market conditions change and they can't rely on just the market to line up for their products. What do you guys think? Love to see it and hear it in the comments below. Please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. You can find me on Instagram, TheRealJohnP, and do not forget to check out DelReyWatch.com. Thanks, guys. We've been chatting with John P.